presentation titled The Great Transformation, How Understanding the Human Condition Actually Transforms the Human Race. I'm Jeremy Griffith, an Australian biologist, and I'm in a studio at one of our World Transformation Movement, WTM, offices in Sydney, Australia. Before I begin, it might be of assistance to print out a copy of the transcript of this talk that we'll make available on our website as a booklet to help you follow the presentation. The first part of this talk is titled Finding the Redeeming Understanding of the Human Condition. It's the hard part for the human race. The problem is that we still have to apply the understanding to free ourselves from the human condition. As I summarised in my introductory video and booklet, the interview, and I fully explained in my definitive book, Freedom, humanity's heroic journey of painstakingly accumulating knowledge has finally led to the finding of the redeeming understanding of our psychologically upset, soul-corrupted human condition, thus ending all the conflict and suffering in human life at its source. And providing the now urgently needed path forward for the complete rehabilitation. So what I'm going to be presenting is the actual roadmap that every human and the human race as a whole is now able to follow for our species' psychological rehabilitation. And I think everyone would agree that the psychological rehabilitation is precisely what the human race now urgently needs. So yes, as I summarise in the interview, our whole human journey of conscious thought and inquiry has finally led to the discoveries by science of the difference in the way genes and nerves process information. That genes can orientate a species, but the nerve-based, fully conscious mind that we humans have needs to understand the world to operate. With the resulting conflict between our instincts and intellect unavoidably causing our psychologically upset, soul-corrupted human condition. And this ability to know why we fully conscious humans were seemingly so stupid as to corrupt our original, all-loving, instinctive self or soul is the redeeming insight we have needed to relieve this core insecurity about our corrupted condition that we have carried since we became fully conscious species some 2 million years ago. The great burden of guilt we humans have suffered from for destroying the magic world of our soul has at last been lifted because we have found the key understanding that ends that underlying pain in our brains and allows the human race to become psychologically secure, happy and sane again. Indeed, when the ancient Greeks had inscribed on their temple the words, "Man, know thyself," they were beseeching us to make sense of, and by so doing, bring an end to all the chaos and suffering and seeming madness of human life. Certainly, humanity's made great progress in understanding the universe around us, but the all-important problem of the human condition remained an unsolved mystery. To the extent that one of history's greatest scientists, Isaac Newton, lamented that I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies but not the madness of people. Well, through the efforts of all the humans who have ever lived, which eventually enabled science to discover how genes and nerves work, that whole jigsaw of confusion and mystery about us humans has now been fitted together so that all the hardship and suffering and madness we humans have been enduring for so long does finally make sense. I mean, Christ said, "The truth will set you free," and now at last the ultimate truth of the explanation of our fundamental goodness has set us free. And the human race is finally on its way back to home to peace, togetherness and happiness. The light of transforming understanding now comes streaming into Plato's dark cave where he said we had to hide from the fear of exposure or our corrupted condition, which has been a horrible existence of blind confusion and devastation. And I'll refer to Plato's cave again shortly. So yes, this liberating light of understanding is going to be so incredibly relieving. The human race will feel like it's waking up from a nightmare. So that's the overall effect of finding the holy grail of the redeeming and reconciling and rehabilitating understanding of our species' 2 million years corrupted condition. We finally have the means to achieve the rehabilitated wholeness for humans that, psychoanalyst Carl Jung was forever telling us. What did he say? Depends on the ability to own our own shadow. Because we can now own the shadow of our species' corrupted condition. And so the human race is finally in a position to become whole. Now, the words psychosis literally means soul illness. And psychiatry literally means soul healing, derived as they are from psyche meaning soul, and osis meaning abnormal state or condition, and eritrea meaning healing. But we've never been able to heal our soul. In effect, explain to our original instinctive self or soul that we, our fully conscious thinking self, is good and not bad. And by so doing reconcile and heal our split selves until now. Which is why Professor Harry Prosen, the former president of the Canadian Psychiatric Association, said about the psychological effect of this understanding that what did he say? I have no doubt this biological instinct versus intellect explanation of the human condition is the holy grail of insight we have sought for the psychological rehabilitation of the human race. Yeah, and the more we digest this relieving understanding of our fundamental goodness, the more healing relief comes to every aspect of our psychologically upset human condition. So yes, we have finally achieved humanity's dreamed of goal of finding the redeeming understanding of our now immensely psychologically upset, soul-corrupted, fallen human condition. To use the lyrics of the song The Impossible Dream from the musical The Man of La Mancha to illustrate this. These words are amazing. Throughout humanity's glorious quest to solve the human condition, we have borne the unbearable sorrow of our corrupted state and run where the brave dare not go, and marched into hell for the heavenly cause of achieving the seemingly impossible dream of righting the unrightable wrong of the condemnation we have been living with for being corrupted. And finally, with our last ounce of courage, vanquish that seemingly unbeatable foe of our ignorant instincts and reach the seemingly unreachable star of the redeeming, dignifying, and liberating and healing understanding of our corrupted condition. It truly is an almost beyond imagining fabulous achievement for us humans to have lived through and overcome the psychological hell that we have had to endure for some 2 million years means we have to be the bravest, most courageous and heroic species to have ever lived on Earth. Now, there is an issue, and this is very important. Our species' great struggle is not yet over because we still have to use or apply the redeeming understanding fast enough to save the human race from the imminent threat of our species' extinction from terminal levels of psychological upset. As I will explain, the way we do this, and this applies both individually and collectively, is through the transformed way of living. But before I get into that part of this presentation, the first problem that has to be understood and overcome is the death effect, which I'll now explain. Part 2, the problem of the death effect. As I've described in my video booklet, The Great Guilt, and in other publications, the only way we humans have been able to cope with the unbearably depressing truth of our corrupted condition, while we couldn't explain it, was to deny its existence. As as I mentioned, the great Greek philosopher Plato used the perfect analogy for this situation, where he described us as humans as having to hide deep underground in a dark cave where no light could get in and expose our corrupted condition. Well, Plato not only described how we have had to hide in this dark cave-like state of denial of our corrupted condition, he even predicted what would happen when one day someone puts together the redeeming understanding of that corrupted condition that liberates the human, all the cave prisoners in his analogy, from having to hide in their dark cave. So yes, so way back during the golden age of Greece in 360 BC, when writing in his dialogue, The Republic, about the time when someone escapes from the cave into the light of day and sees for the first time the real world, and returns to the cave to help the cave prisoners escape into the sun-filled setting outside the cave, which symbolises the transition to the real world. Plato wrote that when the cave prisoner is forcibly dragged up the steep and rocky ascent, this is his actual words, out of the cave and not let go till he had been dragged out into the sunlight, in other words, shown the truthful, real, redeeming explanation of our corrupted, imperfect human condition, and he actually used the term human condition, the process would be a painful one to which he, the cave prisoner, would much object. And when he emerged into the light, his eyes, this is very interesting, his eyes would be so overwhelmed by the brightness of it that he wouldn't be able to see a single one of the things he was now told were real. Significantly, Plato then added, certainly not at first, because he would need to grow accustomed to the light before he could see things in the world outside the cave. So that's amazing. Plato has said, what he said here is that when we humans are presented with the redeeming explanation of our corrupted condition, we would be so attached to living in denial of it that we wouldn't be able to see a single one of the things we were now told were real. And it makes absolute sense that we humans have been living in such deep fear of the issue of our corrupted condition that our first response is to not allow our minds to take in or hear what's being talked about. We suffer from a mental block, what we in the WTM have come to describe as the deaf effect. And I should emphasise that what an amazing insight Plato had. No wonder, A.N. Whitehead, one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century, described the history of philosophy as merely being a series of footnotes to Plato. That's an amazing statement. Plato truly was a very great, denial-free, honest, effective thinker, or what humanity has termed a prophet. So yes, the problem of the deaf effect is very, very real. So it's certainly likely that at first you, the listener, won't be able to, as Plato said, take in or hear a single one of the things you're now told are real. Now, I know that saying that will seem like an impossibility. You'll think, look, if this explanation is rational, I'll be able to understand it. But the problem of the deaf effect is actually true. I mean, you can read many real-life accounts of the deaf effect in The Great Guilt and in other publications. So everyone needs to be warned that they will very likely experience this extraordinary problem of the deaf effect when listening to the description and explanation of the human condition. So now, the great difficulty that this problem of the deaf effect creates is how can it be overcome? So how do we solve this problem of the deaf effect? Having lived in great fear of the issue of our corrupted condition, how can people overcome that fear enough to be able to look at and take in and absorb the explanation of our corrupted condition? And by